Dun dun dun. The thing
Dun,
is
dun.
going crazy.
We're gonna move on to our second story of the day. Something slightly scary-ish, depending on how you look at things, but not as sad, thankfully.
Mhm.
Or it could be, again, depending on how you look at things. Headline goes: China and TikTok threaten U.S. intelligence chief say. Yikes.
Mhm.
So, um, a bunch of heads or directors and chiefs of America's top sort of what would you call them, agencies? So
Mhm.
FBI, national intelligence, and I think someone from the military was there as well, and other people were basically held a hearing with the senates. So they spoke with some of the U.S. senators, and they were like in a courtroom or whatever, and they were they were talking about a lot of stuff as far as I could tell. But one of the things they were talking about was TikTok. And so I'll just give you a quote from Avril Haines. So she's the director of national intelligence, and she says the Chinese Communist Party, or the CCP, represents both the leading and most consequential threat to U.S. national security and leadership globally, and its intelligence specific ambitions and capabilities make it our most serious and consequential intelligence rival. So at this point, she was just talking about the Chinese Communist Party, nothing about TikTok yet. And then so the clips got chopped up and all these things. And so there was an exchange between Marco Rubio, who's a U.S. senator, and FBI Director Christopher Wray. The U.S. senator asked Christopher Wray, could they use TikTok to control data on millions of users? He says yes. Could they like blankly and like
Mhm.
straightforward as well, like yes, just like that. And he goes, could they use it to control the software on millions of devices given the opportunity to do so? Again, blankly, like pointward, he goes, yes. And then he adds that this is a tool, TikTok, that is ultimately within the control of the Chinese government, and to me, it screams out with national security concerns.
Mhm.
Any thoughts?
My immediate thought is, first of all, Americans be hypocritical. They have a lot of apps as well, like Instagram, Facebook, and stuff, because we know that the government influences them as well in a certain way. Um, but yeah, I believe TikTok is a threat, and I know that they know it's a threat. Even I mean, I don't know if we want to get into it right now, but even the way the content in TikTok is in the West, as opposed to the way it is in China. You, one example I can give you is in China, the content is more inspirational and more educational and stuff, whereas here is all dancing and waste of time content. So you can see how they can influence young
Apparently,
people's mind.
I don't mean to. I don't look. Apparently, that's false.
False.
Yeah. So apparently, I don't know this for a fact, but apparently, so there's this comedian called Andrew Schultz, and he
Hmm.
also has a podcast where he mentioned the idea that content in China and content in the US are very different in the
Hmm.
way that you've described it. And then in another episode of the podcast, he admitted that he just sort of came up with that.
Is it?
Yeah, he had no evidence of anything. Like he just said it. Like he
Hmm.
he was just making it up, and
Hmm.
like a bunch of news outlets and a bunch of journalists
Hmm.
picked it up from him and kind of just ran with it with no evidence or other research done whatsoever. So
Okay.
I don't know if he's telling the truth, but as far as I know, um, there's actually no legitimacy behind the claim that the content we consume in the West is different from the content they consume in China. Although
Mhm.
although these contents are all just algorithm based. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it doesn't even have to be country to country. Like, even if me, you, and Camille were all living in where I live now, or all living in London, because of how different we are as people, our
Yeah.
algorithms are gonna be different anyway. So the stuff we're gonna see are different. Like, for example, I might see more dancing, you might see more singing, Camille might see more tajweeds and all these
Mhm.
things. So I don't know about all that. And just the other thing too, with you when you said like how did you say that the US are hypocritical, you said?
That's what I find. Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
cool. So just to play a little bit of a thing, a devil's advocate, the I guess the main difference that the US will argue is that the Chinese TikTok is owned by a Chinese firm. I forgot the name of the Chinese firm. But what the US allege is that the Chinese Communist Party are
Mhm.
directly involved with that firm. And so
Okay.
they argue that whatever it is that we see on TikTok, or whatever, or like the data that we input into TikTok, or the algorithms that TikTok generate as a result of the data that we give them, the Chinese Communist Party have those data. Like, they
Mhm.
have those information for them to extrapolate and interpret and like use against the US, I suppose, or like
Yeah.
to spy on the US. And with things like Facebook or Instagram, or I don't know if Snapchat is American, but Snapchat, or like even Twitter, they will argue that the US is not directly involved with those things. Like, the US government doesn't have a hand in those things. And so those apps, those websites, those companies are independent of the US government.
Mhm.
So their data, the government doesn't have access to.
Yeah. Well, let me. How about if you look at it from a different perspective? Think
Mm.
of these apps and these companies as just a vault that stores information.
Mm.
I think both either government
Mm.
will, seek access to these vaults of information, and there's not much these companies can do. So so you can say, okay, maybe the Chinese government don't directly, control the information and everything, but at any point, if they wanted any form of information, what is this Chinese, company gonna do? What can they do to stop them from, getting this data?
The idea is that the argument is that they already do.
Hmm.
The argument is that they what do you call this? That they already have a hand in all that stuff.
Hmm.
They already are looking at it. And that, the company is essentially just another extension of the government.
Hmm.
That's the
Yeah.
argument that they make.
Okay. So here's my question. Do you think it's similar the way TikTok is with the Chinese government as like Instagram and TikTok are, sorry,
Well,
Instagram.
that's the question in it,
Mhm.
because obviously the US government will tell you no, it's not similar at all. The
Mhm.
US government will tell you that they don't have any access to your data. Well, not just the US government, but these companies will tell you, obviously for privacy reasons, they'll tell you, like, we don't have any, the government doesn't have any access to our data. Um, the government isn't, spying on you through our applications or websites and such, and you're completely safe with us.
Mhm.
They'll argue that, and then the U.S. will say the same. The U.S. government will say the same thing. Um,
Yeah.
but it's a thing of, can you really trust that?
Yeah. Definitely.
that's at the end of the day, that's the question, is like, do you believe that? Do
Hmm.
you believe that the US is doesn't have any sort of reach or hand in the data that these companies are receiving
Hmm.
from people? Because that's the game now, man. The game is all about data now, man. Like
Yeah.
in the place that I work in now, like at the register, it's all about data, bro. Like, hey, what do you call this? Blah 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 blah. We have this promo going on right now. Blah 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 blah. If you sign up with us today, right? If you give us your phone number and email address, we'll give you an additional 10% off on your purchase or off your receipt. So
Yeah.
the company is willing to pay 10% of whatever that purchase is, right? Say the thing is say the product is worth $100. The company is willing to pay that person, or not pay, but the company is willing to lose th- to that person $10 in order to receive that person's contact details.
Yeah.
It's all about data, and then that contact details, then it's all about marketing. So they're sort of, it's an investment at the end of the day, isn't it? It's like,
Yeah.
um we don't mind losing the $10 now, because by getting the by losing the $10, what we're hoping is we'll be able to send you more and more um advertisements and marketing, so that you'll spend more with us and you can become a true customer with us. It's the
Yeah.
cost of acquisition, I think is
Yeah.
what they call it.
And also, you can make money off of just taking that person's information and just
Selling
selling
them.
it.
Yeah, selling
Yeah.
data. Yeah, 100%. That's 100% how a lot of companies make money in the US. And like, I don't know about you guys, but when I lived in London, I didn't get as much spam calls as much as I get them here now. Like,
Mm,
bro, I get at least 5 every day.
that's crazy. Yeah.
Like, at
That's
least.
ridiculous.
That's
At
actually
least.
ridiculous.
And that's just the calls. That's not even the text. I get at least 10 texts every day. Oh, your Netflix, your Amazon, you haven't paid insurance this, insurance that,
Yeah. Yeah.
accident
I
this,
get a lot of
accident that.
emails that are like that.
But the emails,
Emails.
you kind of just, it's junk in it. Like, it's just junk. It just goes kind of straight to junk most of the time. Bro,
Hmm.
these people are able to reach my phone and it rings.
Yeah.
And it rings. I'm just glad
Well,
that, go on, go on.
no, for me, it was a lot at one point, but I've noticed it like slowing down for me. Maybe it's because like I pick up and say I'm not interested. Can you take me off your list? I say that every time and
Of
then I
them,
hang
oh
up.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so maybe that helped me get out of it.
I
I
don't
think for me, it comes in waves. Like sometimes I won't get called for like months, and then the next I'll get called almost every day, once at least.
like a London bus. No, I hear it.
Hmm.
I hear it. It's just, oh, bro, like the US is so crazy with the spam calls. And yeah, you're right. That's 100% how they make their money. It's just selling data like that. And so with that in mind, you know, like the US will say they don't have access to these things, but if the government says I'll buy your data, who can
Hmm.
really, who will really say no? Who has more
Yeah.
money than the US government, realistically?
Yeah.
Um so they'll be ready to buy it. I don't know, man. But just going back to the the TikTok thing. I do wonder though, right? Do you guys remember the hearing of Mark Zuckerberg when he had to sit in front of the US Senate?
Yeah.
And like there were videos of that people edited and created showing just how uninformed like the US Senate were about like modern social media and modern um social networking platforms.
Yeah. I saw that. Yeah.
Do you remember those videos? And I'm just wondering, right? Because Mark kind of alluded to it in some of his responses. So when the US Senate here asks, could they use TikTok to control data on millions of users, or could they use it to control the software on millions of devices given the opportunity to do so? And the FBI director says yes. I'm just wondering, right, from a technicality perspective,
Mhm.
when he says, could they use TikTok to control data on millions of users? Yes. Like, doesn't, like, if TikTok decided, I want to ban your video,
Mhm.
isn't that technically controlling the data of that user?
Hmm. I
So
mean, I don't see it.
what I'm trying to say here is that when he says, so when TikTok controls the data, so for example, when you give access to an app, to, for example, Instagram, when you give Instagram access to your photos,
Mhm.
they're technically now able to control your data, technically.
Yeah, so they can see your pictures and your folders and stuff like that.
Right. But there's no malicious intent behind it, or
Mhm.
at least as far as we're concerned. So on a technicality perspective,
Yeah.
the FBI director isn't lying when he says yes, TikTok can control data on millions of users,
Oh, I see what you mean.
but that control doesn't necessarily mean they're doing something evil with it.
Yeah, I know.
It's just
It could. Yeah, so from our perspective, just like, okay, you have access to our folders, to our pictures, and, like,
yeah,
some
yeah,
necessary stuff. But from their perspective, since they don't know that, it might look like, oh no, they actually are like going your phone and
exactly,
manually like scrolling and all that. Yeah.
exactly.
It's to
So
create a narrative.
exactly. So then when you have an FBI director saying stuff like that, and then adding, this is a tool that is ultimately within the control of the Chinese government, and to me it screams out with national security concerns, but then it sounds a lot like fear mongering or like
Yeah, it does.
propaganda. Um and that's just another way of looking at it to me. Like, it's possible that they're just using this as a sort of like Saddam Hussein had WMD type thing,
Yeah,
where it's just like it's just it's creating a narrative for the American people, so that when they do something to China, the American people will be on the side of the American government,
I can see that. Yeah.
as opposed to just being like completely unwarranted. But that is interesting though.
Kind of, isn't that kind of like what they're doing in Russia as well? Like how they're making Ukraine look like the bad people
Yeah,
in Russia
to their
and
people.
everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely. 100%. Yeah, that's a great point actually. And actually this story, or this not this story, this hearing, I think came after the news that I think about 2 weeks ago or so, the Canadian government banned TikTok from all of its government employees.
Mm-hmm.
So all Canadian government employees are banned from TikTok. And
Okay.
I think again the reasoning was that they're under the impression that the Chinese government are basically spying on them through TikTok.